My wife said, "I don't feel anything when I'm with you anymore." Jack froze in the doorway, his keys still in his hand. The words hit like a punch to the gut, sharp, deliberate, and without hesitation. Emma stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, watching him with an expression that was neither angry nor sad. Just distant. He blinked. "What?" She exhaled as if she were tired of explaining something obvious. "I don't feel the excitement, the passion, the attraction. I don't know if it's you or if it's me, but something is missing." She tilted her head slightly, watching him closely. "And I need to feel it again." Jack felt the weight of her words settle in, cold and impersonal. "So, what are you saying?" Emma shrugged as if the answer should have been obvious. "If you want me, prove that I should want you back." Jack just stared at her. A joke, a test, something. But no, she was completely serious. She said it like she was making a casual decision, like choosing a new restaurant to try. "Prove it?" His voice was steady, but his pulse pounded in his ears. "Like how?" "That's up to you. Let me get this straight. He was supposed to chase after her, figure out what would make her excited again, and earn back her attraction, like a desperate contestant on some twisted game show, waiting for her approval." Jack inhaled slowly, pushing down the immediate urge to argue. If he reacted out of anger, she'd twist it. He needed to think. Instead, he asked, "Is that how you see me now? Someone who has to compete just to be wanted?" Emma exhaled sharply, annoyance flickering in her eyes. "I don't. No, okay? I just know I don't feel the way I used to, and I don't want to force it. I need something more." That was it. Need. It wasn't about them. It was about her desires, her excitement, her satisfaction. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. Before, he might have bent over backward to prove himself. But now, he saw it for what it was, and he wasn't playing that game. Jack expected some kind of reaction, maybe guilt, maybe hesitation. But Emma didn't waver. She stood there, confident, like she had just issued a challenge and was waiting to see how he would respond, and that was his first clue. She wasn't afraid he'd leave. She wasn't nervous about losing him. She had said those words knowing he would stay, knowing he would scramble to fix things, to chase after her, to win her back. But she had underestimated one thing. Jack had nothing to prove. For the next few days, he watched her, carefully. At first, Emma acted like everything was normal. She would make little comments here and there, testing the waters. "You used to be more romantic," she said one morning over coffee, stirring her spoon slowly, watching for his reaction. Jack nodded. "Huh." That night, she scrolled through her phone while sitting across from him on the couch, her nails tapping against the screen. After a few minutes, she sighed dramatically. "I just want to feel excited again, you know? Like in the beginning." Jack didn't look up. "That's nice." And that's when she started pushing harder. It started with comparisons. Subtle at first. A coworker of mine surprised his girlfriend with a weekend trip. So romantic. "Did you know Sarah's boyfriend leaves her little notes every morning?" So sweet. Jack refused to bite. The more he stayed neutral, the more frustrated she became. He could see it in her eyes, the irritation, the impatience. She wanted him to react. She wanted to feel wanted. She wanted control. Then came the real test. 1. Evening, Emma got dressed up for a girls' night out. Nothing unusual, except this time she lingered in front of the mirror a little longer, checked herself from different angles, smoothed her dress over her hips. She wanted him to notice. When she walked past him to grab her purse, she hesitated. Just enough. "I don't know what time I'll be back," she said casually, glancing at him from the corner of her eye. She was waiting for him to ask who she was going with, where she was going, how late she'd be out, maybe even show a little jealousy. Jack took a sip of his drink. Have fun. The flicker of irritation in her expression was subtle. So subtle that if he hadn't been watching for it, he might have missed it, but he didn't miss it, and that's when he knew for sure. This wasn't about fixing their relationship. It wasn't about earning her love back. This was about control. And the more he refused to play along, the more restless she became. At first, Emma acted like his indifference didn't bother her. Jack saw the small smirk on her lips whenever. He didn't react the way she expected, as if she was thinking, good. He's giving me space to miss him. He'll start chasing soon. But then the days stretched on, and Jack still wasn't chasing. That's when her confidence started to crack. She became restless, fidgety, more aware of him, even when pretending not to be. One night while scrolling, through her phone on the couch, she suddenly spoke, her tone deliberately casual. You don't ask me about my day anymore. Jack shrugged. You don't seem interested in telling me. She frowned. He saw it. The split second of hesitation before she looked back at her phone. The tests became more obvious. Emma started talking about how much fun she had whenever she went out, emphasizing how free she felt. She waited for him to react. Jack just nodded and went back to whatever he was doing. She started dressing up more. At first, just for nights out, then, even when she wasn't going anywhere special. A short trip to the store, full makeup, a casual coffee run, heels. She'd linger in the doorway before leaving, waiting for him to compliment her, to acknowledge her, to give her that validation. But he didn't, and that's when the panic truly set in. One evening, she came home later than usual. Jack was in the kitchen, casually making himself a late dinner. She set her purse down, a little too loudly, as if trying to get his attention. Did you even notice how late it is? She asked, her voice sharper than before. Jack glanced at the clock. Yeah, she crossed her arms. And that doesn't bother you? Jack took a bite of his food. Should it? He saw it, the shift happening in real time. The way she clenched her jaw, the way her fingers curled slightly as if gripping onto something that was slipping through her hands. This wasn't going the way she had planned. She had thought he'd crack by now, that he'd break, that he'd start proving himself to her. Instead, he was calm, unbothered, and worst of all, she was the one losing control. Emma tried to act like nothing had changed, like she still had control, like she could still pull him back in whenever she wanted. But Jack saw through it. The shift had already happened, and she knew it. At first, she pretended not to care. She stopped making passive-aggressive comments, stopped bringing up other couples, stopped testing him. Jack knew what she was doing. She thought that by acting indifferent, he'd feel the distance and come, crawling back. But he didn't, and that's when she got desperate. It started small. Little gestures she hadn't done in months. One morning, she made him coffee. Something she used to do before things went bad. She set the cup down in front of him, her voice light. Here. Made it how you like it. Jack took a sip. Thanks. Then went back to reading. No big reaction. No acknowledgement of the shift. It wasn't enough for her. A few days later, she suggested a movie night. Like we used to, she added, watching him carefully. Jack agreed, but he didn't make a big deal out of it. They sat together, watched the movie, but he didn't lean into her, didn't reach for her hand, didn't try to turn it into something more. She kept waiting. He never took the bait, and that's when the frustration boiled over. One evening, while they sat in the living room, she suddenly blurted out, "Do you even care anymore?" Jack looked up from his phone. "About what?" Emma scoffed, crossing her arms. "About us." Jack leaned back, considering her words. Then he asked, "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," she snapped. "You don't even try anymore." Jack let that sit in the air for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe because I realized I shouldn't have to." Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Jack studied her. The tension in her shoulders. The way she was gripping the couch. It means, he said finally, that I see things differently now. Emma opened her mouth, then closed it again. She wasn't used to this version of him, the one who wasn't scrambling to meet her expectations, who wasn't constantly proving himself, and she didn't like it. She was torn. On one hand, she wanted to keep up the act, to maintain the upper hand. But on the other, she was starting to realize something terrifying. She was losing him, and for the first time, she was the one feeling uncertain. That night, after their conversation in the living room, Emma changed. Not in the way Jack had once hoped she would, not because she suddenly understood the damage she had done, but because she finally felt the fear of losing control, the fear of losing him. At first, she tried to pull him back in subtly. Random. Hugs, casual touches, smiles she hadn't given him in months. But Jack saw right through it. It wasn't love, it wasn't genuine effort, it was manipulation, disguised as affection, and he was done falling for it. One evening, she came into the bedroom while he was getting ready for bed. She hesitated in the doorway before walking over and sitting beside him on the edge of the mattress. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. Jack set his phone down and nodded. "Sure." She looked down at her hands. "I don't want things to be like this." "Like what?" She swallowed hard, then looked up at him. "I feel like you're pulling away." Jack nodded slowly. "Maybe I am." She flinched at his honesty. "Why?" Jack took a deep breath, making sure he chose his words carefully. "Because I finally understand what's been happening," he said, "and I'm done playing along." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. He wasn't supposed to say that. She was supposed to fall apart first. She was supposed to realize she needed him when it was too late. But Jack wasn't waiting around for her epiphany. "You put me in a position where I had to fight for something that should have been mutual," he continued. "You made me feel like I had to prove myself over and over just to get the bare minimum from you, and I let it happen because I thought, that's what love was." Emma shook her head. "That's not what I meant to." "It doesn't matter what you meant," Jack interrupted. "What matters is what you did. And now you're only trying because you realize I won't keep chasing you." Her eyes welled up with frustration. "That's not fair." Jack let out a short laugh. "Fair," he repeated. "Fair was me showing up for this marriage every single day while you kept moving the finish line." She stayed silent. Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Here's the truth," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You wanted control. You wanted me to compete for you, to feel like I had to earn every bit of affection. And for a long time, I did." He met her gaze. "But I'm done." Her face paled. "So that's it?" she whispered. Jack nodded. "That's it." She didn't try to stop him. He had expected more resistance, more bargaining, maybe even some attempt to flip the situation back in her favor. But after he told her he was done, she just sat there, staring at the floor, processing something she never thought would happen. Maybe she thought he'd cave at the last minute, that he'd second-guess himself, that he'd decide she was worth fighting for. But the truth was, he had already fought enough. And the only person he needed to fight for now was himself. That night, he packed a bag. Emma didn't say anything as she watched him from the doorway. There was no anger, no pleading, just quiet disbelief, as if the realization had finally settled in. He wasn't the one chasing anymore. Before he left, he paused at the door, looking at her one last time. There was a time when he would have given anything to fix things, to hold on to what they had. But now, all he felt was relief. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said. Emma opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no words came. So Jack walked out, and he didn't look back. The first few days felt strange, not painful, not heartbreaking, just quiet. He had expected to feel lost, like he had abandoned something he was supposed to keep fighting for. But instead, he felt lighter, like he had finally put down a weight he didn't even realize he was carrying. He focused on himself. Started spending more time doing things that actually made him happy. Hobbies he had neglected, friendships he had let fade, even simple things, like taking a walk without feeling like he had to be somewhere. For the first time in a long time, he felt like himself again. Emma reached out a few times, not directly asking him to come back, but with messages that were clearly fishing for a reaction. "Hope you're doing okay. I found one of your shirts here. Do you want to pick it up? We should talk." Jack never responded, not because he was angry, not because he was bitter, but because he had no reason to anymore. The chapter was closed, and he wasn't interested in rereading it, and that's the thing about walking away from something toxic. You don't miss the person. You miss the idea of what you thought it could have been. But once you accept that it was never really yours to begin with, you don't feel the need to hold on anymore. Jack wasn't bitter. He wasn't resentful. He was just free. And that was enough. If someone makes you feel like you have to earn their love, walk away. Love isn't a competition, and your worth isn't something to be proved. A healthy relationship is built on mutual respect, not one person, constantly seeking approval while the other dangles affection like a prize. The moment you stop chasing, you see the truth. Some people don't want love, they want control. And once you reclaim your power, they lose theirs. Don't waste time trying to convince someone to value you. Instead, choose yourself. Walk away from anyone who makes you question your worth. That's real freedom.